today I have Dave Moreno, partner at the law office of Spar and Bernstein, executive vice president at Shaw Sports Group, co-founder of Media Abundance. David, how you doing today, man?
I'm great, Mike. How are you? Thanks for having me. I'm doing great.
Pleasure is all mine. I'm so excited to get to talk to you about the draft, about football, about being a sports agent. Obviously, we've met multiple times at this point through David Meltzer, a good friend of ours, good friend of Jason's. And I'm really excited to get you on the Win Daily Show because we're just trying to spread positivity. We're trying to spread how others in the sports industry go about their days. And obviously, there's some weird stuff going on in the world right now. Many people aren't quite as busy as you, so I guess I'm thankful for your time, but
Of
excited to ask
course.
you some questions. So the first question I have for everybody on the Win Daily Show is, how do you make sure you're winning each and every day?
Absolutely. I think it all starts with getting a good night rest the day before. As we alluded to briefly, a good friend of ours, Dave Meltzer, in common, one thing that he really studies is sleep. We spend, so much of our time sleeping. It's important to prioritize getting a good night's sleep. And then for me, it falls right back into the very next thing is when I wake up, how can I fill the white spaces in my calendar? How can I be more productive? Because I do have a number of different entities and priorities and responsibilities to both individuals, personally and professionally. So I want to make sure I'm always available. That's my main priority is to be available for folks that need me. I think that's what makes a difference professionally and personally.
I love that, man. And that's always very important. And you're the first person to answer that question by starting at the day before. So I appreciate that. I 100% agree. Getting a good night's sleep is very important. And, making sure you maintain that sleep schedule, as you said. David preaches that to you. He preaches it to me. He preaches it to everybody. So I always think it's interesting. And, I kind of know the answer to this question, but I always want to ask it kind of a leading question anyway. With the understanding of trying to fill the white spaces in your calendar and always being accessible, how do those two things go hand in hand to make sure that if you are filling the space, how can you then be accessible if you're trying to do something?
Yeah, I think it starts with check in before people check in with you, right? That way you're more in control of the communication. If I know I need to speak to 10 people in a day, rather than wait for them to call me when I'm actually prioritizing something else, I'll just kick off the day with either a quick text to all of them, hey, what time are you free to speak? So I can put that actually in my calendar. I find that when I plan things, it's easier to manage expectations and B, productivity, or I'll just kick off the day and call them right away. So that's how I usually do it.
I love it. Manage the expectations, manage the communication, always be on top of it. This is incredible, man. And so, did you always want to be a sports agent?
That's an
Uh-oh.
interesting story. Most this is tough. Most kids, that play sports, once they realize that 2% of folks go pro, they want to figure out how they can stay around sports. That was not the case here. I played college basketball. I was pretty decent. It's pretty good. I went to law school kind of on an athlete burnout. I was just over the game of basketball. I dabbled with trying to be a fifth year senior with the University of Miami football team while in law school. But I really, was so gung-ho on criminal justice reform and systemic discrimination and trying to make my stamp on the world in that way. It just happened that once I graduated law school, I took a job at the Manhattan DA's office, which is the most prestigious prosecutor's office in the country, probably in the world. And by doing that, by doing the right thing, by people, by still being connected to, athletes as friends and in my social circles, growing up in New York, playing basketball at a high level, and then being an attorney that folks became to know, love, and trust. Naturally, just like my banker and real estate friends, my athlete friends started to rely on me for things and would ask, hey, can you put a set of eyes on this? And always just saying yes, right, when I can. That's how it started. And it wasn't until I got pretty deep down that road on a legal side, doing arbitrations for professional athletes, handling smaller contract matters for some of them, that they were like, man, you do so much more for me than my actual agent does. And that's not to cast aspersions on any actual agent, but I do think, those with actual legal experience come with such a wealth of knowledge. Not those that are lawyers that just have JDs and become agents. Those have actually practiced, come with such a different perspective. And I came from a world where I left the DA's office, I started doing criminal defense, and I was representing, a lot of times young kids that were facing, life in jail or
Hmm.
25 years in jail. I just felt like for me, it was a little bit of burnout from, quote unquote, fighting a good fight. And you guys can hear the thunder. It's thundering here.
Yeah, thundering by
uh,
me. I didn't catch it though, so hopefully.
yeah,
Oh, there's mine. All right, we're good.
there you go. Yeah. It's kind of burnout from that side. And I was like, look, if I can work with the same age group of young people that have so much positivity flowing through them and going forward, I think it's time to make that jump to channel these skills that I learned, really defending folks from something really nefarious to helping to do more positive with that. So it was through just relationships, kind of being at the right place at the right time, and it happened naturally and organically. Which for me, I think the universe put me back to where I was supposed to be because I grew up loving sports so much. Checking the stats every day as a 10th grader. Even as a grown man in my 20s, I could probably tell you what the 12th man on the Nets was averaging. Still had a passion for it, but not necessarily wanted to do it professionally until it came about
Hmm.
naturally.
That is a really interesting way of going about it too, especially, I mean, understanding that, as you said, the universe put you back into it, but the only way you could have done what you were capable of doing when you were just helping out your friends was to go this route, right? It's not like you had to go this route to get the legal expertise as you have and you've been able to do. And then you're able to take all that information, wisdom, and experience and be able to impart it onto others. Let it come through you to others so that way they can utilize that help. And that's kind of, as you said, when people kept telling you, hey, man, you're doing a lot more for me than my agent is, how can we work something out? I think it's really cool that you were then able to kind of see that because a lot of people would say, I'm kind of doing well over here. I don't need to do that. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and continue to move forward with it. So what is that grind of a lawyer and an agent like? I know they're kind of they're cousins, let's call them, right? As you said, you kind of have to be a little versed in one to be versed in the other. Like, what is that daily grind like? And as you said, waking up, how many white spaces are actually on your calendar when you do wake up in a
Yeah.
normal world, let's call it?
In a normal world, meaning a pre-COVID, post-COVID world, after we get out of this, um, there are not many, especially when my law practice is in full swing. And, I still go to trial. I still have cases. My firm is very active. It's a priority of mine. With the sports calendar, it's ebbs and flows. There are times when it's extremely busy, but there are also times where it's down. For me, one thing I do when I look towards taking it from a sports perspective and from a legal perspective, I want to make sure every client on the legal side and every client on the sports side, feels like they're a priority. So it's really important to have constant communication with them. And then the second thing, and probably the most important thing, is to always be learning. Early on in my legal career, I realized that, and much to my mom's dismay, she said, you're going to be a jack of all trades and a master of none. For me, that worked, right? And I don't want to say I'm a master of none, but even on my legal career early on, I challenged myself to step outside my comfort zone. So when I started off in the law firm doing criminal defense, I then started the sports and entertainment group, right? From my natural experiences, kind of self-taught. Then I started the corporate business group, right? So I took all these things on, and it's the same thing in my sports practice. I'm just not limited to, contract negotiations or, sending the marketing out to some third party. I figured out to either be in control of every single aspect or have the resources available to me, whether through personal relationships or through text and context, to learn to make sure things get done at a high level, but everything flows through me and out from there.
Hmm.
So I know that's a long-winded answer to your question. Not many white spaces because I'm needed by a lot of folks, but I've been trying to prioritize everybody and treat everybody like they're the most important person. Because that's how I've always looked at both things.
Hmm.
Whether you have a driving while intoxicated criminal matter, or you have some complicated white-collar crime. If you're an undrafted free agent or a potential first-round pick, if you call Dave, he's going to answer.
Hmm. I love that, man. You got to be accessible. We know that one. That's one of the first rules of the game. Always be accessible, as you said.
Absolutely.
And I love how you said it before. If you have to talk to somebody, just reach out to them first. Don't wait for them to talk to you while it's in one of those not so empty spaces in the calendar. So I think it's very interesting, kind of how you go about it and what you do, and understanding that there is an expertise level that's needed from you from all of these places. And you might not call yourself not a master of any of them, but at the same time, you're clearly doing your best and you're obviously achieving at a very high level. So if you won't do it, David, let me do it. I believe you're a
I
master
appreciate
at
that,
all
Mike.
of it. So, so with that, I mean, what was it like? You know, as you kind of gave us the reason why you started the sports group and you know, working with these athletes. What were those? What was it like getting those first few clients? And again, kind of, for lack of a better term, really learning a little bit on the job, because I'm sure, again, you knew the legal side of it, but I'm sure there's an entire other side of the business that you didn't really have access to before this.
Yeah, this is a lesson I learned from my business partner and close friend, Dave Meltzer. I didn't want to pay the dummy tax, right? What's the dummy tax? Doing the exact same thing that others before you have done wrong. And how do you learn to not pay the dummy tax? By going through it. Well, for me, it was really important to position myself in this business with those that have the experience and to know when, you know, you're barking up the wrong tree. Recruiting is a very, very unique I don't want to say animal. It's a very unique thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
That everybody goes about differently. There's no specific formula to be successful at recruiting. If you look at there's no prototypical agent, you know, in terms of race, demographic, creed, et cetera, background, you know. So one thing I wanted to do is to learn as much as possible from those who have been there. So when I thought about making my foray into the industry, being someone that I think brings a certain level of expertise and success to the table, it was either for me, I was going to create my own business or partner up with someone that I knew and trusted and actually their vision aligned with what I wanted to do in this industry. Because for me, it was a priority being a former athlete to actually prioritize how I can help athletes grow both in their sport, but more importantly, in business and outside of their sport, right? For me, entrepreneurship has been a big part of my life. I think athletes having such a large platform, you know, being visible, being in this country where we put athletes on probably a higher pedestal than the people that are fighting cancer research, right? They have so much access. How can I help them maximize that to set themselves up for generational wealth? A lot of the average American thinks that, you know, professional athletes have generational wealth just by virtue of playing a sport, doesn't take into account taxes, fees, you know, all the handlers and the folks that go in behind the scenes. If you manage your money correctly, you should, if you're a top of the line player. But if we're talking about some of these fringe guys, especially in NFL, when there's no guaranteed money, they really have to be smart and strategic as to their financial decisions. So I want to find someone that shared in that vision and want to help me create and build something that went towards that vision. So for me, early on, I partnered up with someone, and it's a funny story, and everything is just the universe, right? My partner in the sports agency, Sunny Shah, was a juror on the very first criminal trial I had when I was
Love
a
it.
prosecutor.
Look
Like
at that.
how is the universe for that, right? He was a juror on my first trial, and I remember going through jury selection as a young prosecutor. First trial, got my nerves. You're going through the questionnaire. You ask this guy what he does. He's like, I'm a sports agent. In the back of my mind, I'm like, yeah, right, whatever. Like, who's really actually a sports agent, you know? So we do the trial. Nothing comes of it professionally. I didn't remember the guy's name at the time. So just being in New York City and being out, maybe about 6 months later, I happened to be out at an event, and it turned out to be a draft party for, I believe, Xavier Rhodes at the time was coming out of Florida State.
Mm-hmm.
And Sonny had Xavier and some other guys that time. And I was out at this party, and we're looking at each other. I'm like, how do I know this guy? Right? I knew I saw him every day for about a week and a half on this trial, but I couldn't figure out how we knew each other. So I'm big on never missing an opportunity. Walked right up to him and said, hey, man, I don't know how I know you, but I feel like I know you from somewhere. He was just as open. He's like, I feel the same way, man. Let's exchange numbers. Let's figure it out. So shortly thereafter, we reconnected. We sat down, we spoke, figured out what the connection was. And he was like, hey, man, I really love the way you carried yourself. You know, in the courtroom, you're uber impressive. We spoke about backgrounds, and we just became friends. And I had an opportunity to watch how he built his business and how he treated his clients from the lens of being, hey, I'm this guy's buddy, as we built the friendship. And I saw that his clients were actually treated like family. And it wasn't just the age-old slogan, like, you come here, this is a family, you know, I'm going to be there for you. I actually saw, you know, he was a godfather to his clients' kids and vice versa. And I was like, you know what, if I ever do this, he's going to be someone I'd consider doing this with. And then aligning myself, obviously, with Dave, who I've known for years, who has his background with Lee Steinberg as a sounding board to say, should I do this or should I do that? So for me, it's really, really important to both have mentors that have been there and also folks that have been through the fire. And I've got folks I don't compete with anybody. That's one thing that I don't do. I think that has helped me mature quickly in this business. There's no one that is my competition to where if we're going after the same guy, Mike, I'm not going to say, man, I hate that guy. I'm going to disparage you to all the players. I'm going to speak to you as much as possible, not in any negative way, just to learn as much as I can from you, right? Because we're only as good as our competition, and
Mhm.
it's good to keep your enemies, quote unquote, close. And I don't do it for that reason, because I don't truly see anybody as competition. We live in an abundant world. There are more than enough players. There are more than enough jobs. So I think one thing for me that I've always prioritized is, when I'm out at these agent conferences, I'm meeting as many people as possible. Don't look at them as competition. When I took the agent exam, right after the exam, I hung out with about 7 of the other agents, and we formed a little bond. And some of the older agents that I've known for years, like, man, you're out of your mind. Why would you speak to these guys? So those are the things I think that have helped, me build this and learn as much as I can, because we're all kind of going through the same thing. And I guess having a legal background, coming from the learning background where we learn in group settings, law school's broken up into sections, and you rely on your section, right? You guys study together, you grow together. So for me, I've always tried to have a network of other agents, experienced agents, other lawyers, finance and business people that I can rely on, because I want to always learn as much as I can.
That is great. I mean, learn as much as you can, provide as much value as you can to everyone that is around you, and speak
Absolutely.
to everyone and be a good human being. It's always interesting to me. The agency world gets a very bad rap, and I think that rap then kind of bleeds into the sports industry in general. Is the cutthroat nature, the backstabbing nature of what an agency is like, and you are clearly coming at it from a completely, the literal different angle. And I think that, so why is the world like that? I mean, it sounds like you said, with some of these older gentlemen, like they're saying, like, why would you talk to any of these people? They're you even said it before, your quote unquote enemies. Like, is that dramatized for TV and movies, or is there a part of the world that's like that, where you're just completely just throwing that aside? As you said, we live in an abundant world. There's more than enough for everybody.
Yeah, Mike, I'd say you're 1,000% right. This is a very, very vicious, sometimes immature,
Hmm.
egotistical business. I've run into things that have shaken my balance in my value system, to where I don't want to be a part of this business, where,
Hmm.
things that have happened to me early on in my career, where you try to do everything the right way. And, you bang your head against the wall because either kids and their family don't see it. And you're like, dude, trust the person that is trying to actually help you, not the person that is offering you money and putting what you've worked for, at risk, you know what I
Hmm.
mean? For a short-term game or gain. No, there are those in this industry that don't do things the right way, and I think that was a hurdle and an obstacle for me early on. That, not being emotionally, because I lead. If you're my guy, Mike, you're my guy, right? I'm going to do everything for you that I can, and I approach this business in that same way. And when you lose, right, when you do everything right by a kid, and he fires you for reasons that are not, that have nothing to do with your ability or your aptitude, just like, hey, he saw a nice shinier object out there, oftentimes money, and they go for that. It hurts, right? And I learned to have thick skin. I learned that there's nothing that anyone can do to me in this business that's going to change my approach, and the reason why I got into it, which is to educate and teach athletes to be financially literate and savvy, so that they can make a greater impact, A, in their community, and B, to their family as a whole, because then it just helps to influence so many other people, because so many young people in this country are influenced by their sports stars,
Hmm.
that they grew up looking up to. How many people in our generation, Mike, have been talking about The Last Dance this week, right? Even though Jordan wasn't that warm and fuzzy character, guess what? Every single person
Hmm.
wanted to be like Mike, right? So that's the reason why I'm in this, right? If I can have that Michael Jordan that can put out a message of positivity, to help people help other people, and it makes the world a better place ultimately.
I completely agree, man. I think it's very important, and it is sad. Obviously dealing with, as you said, you're dealing with kids, right? You're dealing with 18, 19, 20, 21 year olds, depending on what sport, 22 occasionally. The fact that, someone can come along, some 35, 45, 50-year-old guy who's been in the business for a while, as you said, some shiny object that you can kind of show them. Again, you're dealing with kids, right? Our brains aren't fully developed yet. There's like a lot of things that are wrong in that situation. And as you said, you try and help them, try and show them. And, if they can't see it, they can't see it. There's only so much you can do. How long did it take for you, I guess, to learn all of this about the industry? Was there one that just kind of happened very quickly and you're like, I am in for a ride? Or did they kind of ease you, the colloquial like ease you into the industry before they really, smacked you over the head with something?
No, I mean, I'm still learning, right? And I think those that have been doing it for 10, 15 years, they're also still learning because in human nature, you can never predict what people are going to do. I don't care what anyone says. You can read as many books about human psychology and sociology, but you can't predict how someone's going to react when put in a certain situation. Um, for me, without really getting, into any specifics or dropping any names, it happened early on where um, just thinking about recruiting from how to go about it and how, and I looked at it like, when I was going through this process, albeit at a much smaller scale, what would have been the things that are important to me? Who were the decision makers that were important in my life? Who should I, as a potential agent, representation, or manager, who should I go after in terms of building a relationship, actual meaningful relationship, impactful relationship to show that I'm here for the right reasons? Is it the dad? Is it the mom? Is it the player themselves? That's the first place I think you learn it, right? Because there may be one person in that circle, or it could be all three in some
Mm-hmm.
situations, that is actually legitimate and in it for the right reasons, but almost unequivocally, there is someone attached to these kids, basketball, football, baseball, whatever, that does not have their best interests at heart. And unfortunately, there are times when that person is the decision maker. And you can see that right away because there will be people that say, hey, you want to meet Joe Schmo football player? I need X, Y, and Z in my account right now. And those are the conversations that I just say, you know what? He's not the right type of kid for me. I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to go after him, right? I'm not going to. I have to answer to a higher ethical standard. I'm not,
Yeah.
just an agent. I'm an attorney that has to answer to the board of ethics, right? In addition to my actual, value system that I have got to, be able to sleep well with every night. So you find out pretty much right away, and you may not find out if you're dealing with some of the kids on the fringes. There are positional stereotypes. So far the offensive linemen that I deal with, those kids are all A+. That seems to be, kind of a trend when you're dealing with kids. But there are kids that are on the fringes that all have the same kind of situation. And I don't think it comes from scarcity or, it has nothing to do with, money or demographics. Some of these kids actually come from great backgrounds. Right. But it just has to do with greed. And it's not necessarily the actual athletes themselves. It's the adults that lash themselves to these children that try to manipulate them for their own personal gains.
Yeah, and that's unfortunate. I mean, again, dealing with kids, stuff like that's going to happen. As you said, maybe there are a couple decision makers. Maybe there's one specific one, and and sometimes that person does take a hold, which is unfortunate. And so let's I definitely want to talk a little bit about the NFL draft that's coming up. This episode should be released tomorrow, which is one day before the first round, so right before the weekend. I mean, all we've had to look forward to the last couple months is The Last Dance and the draft, in my opinion. So we got the first two episodes of The Last Dance. Going to be getting a couple more episodes in the next few weeks as it goes. But the draft, I'm so excited. I'm a huge draft junkie. I watch it all. We love it all. We're actually going to have a live show here for Win Daily, which is going to be a lot of fun. But tell us a little bit about, I guess, how long you've been doing this whole draft process. I mean, this one's going to be really weird, so we can talk about specifics, and then some of the athletes that you've been able to help through this process and into the league further.
Yeah. So, I mean, the process has been going since January, for some of the guys, mid-December, from everything from pre-draft training to some of this pre-draft marketing to, getting the guys into the all-star games, right? You got your big three, the Senior Bowl, East-West Shrine, et cetera, et cetera. But we've been at it since January. And I think, unfortunately for most of my players, there was only one guy that had his pro day because, right in early March is when things really started to shut down. And it just so happened that the kid was lucky. His school had a really early pro day. It's a guard from the University of Buffalo, Paul Nosworthy. He had his pro day on March 11th. And even on March 11th, where I think the following week is when, New York really decided to shut down. Even on March 11th, they only had about 12 teams at the pro day for University of Buffalo. Right, University of Buffalo is not Alabama, but guess what? If you look at NFL rosters, they've got a bunch of guys in the league. That's not a school that gets 12 guys at a pro day. I mean, 12 teams. That's a school that usually has 32 teams. So you can start to see the effects of this unique world that we're in. Even though this kid had his pro day, it was less attended than it would have been in different climates. So for me, throughout this process, it's been a lot of this, Mike. It's been a lot of Zoom calls. with the guys and their families. Hey, this is what I've been hearing, because I'm big on face to face. Even though I represent guys that are from other states, I start at home. A lot of kids that I want to represent. Guess what? The kid I just mentioned, Paul Nosworthy, he grew up 4 houses away from where I grew up. Right?
That's awesome.
Literally went to the neighboring high school. So those are the people that I really, really want to represent. Because, I know, we were joking earlier. He got a call from a team. I'm not going to say the name of the team. They said, "We really like you because you're Buffalo tough." And I texted him. I said, "Nah, man, you learned that toughness at Koznek Park." He's dying laughing, right? Because we share that in common. So throughout this process, it's really important for me to speak to them face to face, answer all of the questions, right? Because for most of these families, almost all of them, it's their first time going through anything remotely like this. No one knows what to expect. No one knows what to expect in a normal draft year. But then in this situation, there's no one that has an answer key, right? There was speculation early on that the draft wouldn't even happen this week, right? And whether or not it should be happening this week is a different discussion, but it is. So how do we optimize our guys in this situation? We had 0 guys get invitations to the combine this year. I think 2 or 3 of them probably should have gotten invitations. They were on the cusp, but certainly guys that had scheduled workouts and visits with teams that were all canceled. So now what do we do? It's all about relationships. Right? These scouts and GMs and personnel guys, they didn't start recruiting these kids in January. They've been recruiting them over years, right? Some of these kids since high school, these grades that you get when you're in high school, that follows you throughout college. The PFF grade you get, every game in college, that follows you. So their scouting departments are compiling these profiles for these players that are exhaustive. So I'm not going to be, a silver-tongued lawyer that's going to be able to call at the Jets and say, "Hey, draft my guy because of X, Y, and Z." That's not realistic. Any agent that's telling kids that is really just unfortunately blowing smoke up there. What you need to do in a situation is be honest. Be honest with your guys. Say, I've heard from these 7 teams. These are the teams that are showing the most interest with you. I've also compiled a list of these other 5 teams that have positional need where you'd be an actual fit, and that's what we're going to target. I can't cold call 32 teams because I lose credibility, So that's one thing I do. Every time I speak to a team about one guy, I say, what are your other needs? And if it's appropriate, I'll bring up another guy. And if I'm speaking to a team about player 1, I'd ask, is there anything else that you need to see from him? Any questions that you have that I can answer, whether it's medical records. I'm big on being ready so you know how to get ready, right? If the teams are going to call and want players' medical records, I'm not going to have to deal with their universities to get them. That's one thing I do right away. So I have the medical records. I'll send them right away. If they need him on film, I've got one kid that's a linebacker, University of Cincinnati, Brian Wright, who'll probably come into play on day 3. Teams have said he's a converted DN to linebacker, tackle machine. I think was first or second in his conference in tackles on a team that was top 25 in the country. But because he's a bigger linebacker, one of the concerns is, can he cover tight ends? And it's all about value in the NFL, right? What can you bring to a team? And being a 2-down Mike and then having to come off the field on 3rd down because you can't cover is a lot less valuable than somebody that can either slide to the edge and then rush the quarterback on that end. So I got some of that feedback from teams. So what do? We compiled a video of Brian showing, some defensive end drills in addition to all the film he has from Cincinnati playing linebacker. So that way, every weakness we try to turn into a strength. That's where you can make a difference. Not calling a guy and saying, "Hey, my kid is so awesome. This is why you should draft him."
Exactly. As you said, they've been paying attention to these guys for a while. They know exactly who they are in some capacity. They've seen something on them. So as you said, I like the way you said it. You're not a silver-tongued lawyer that's coming in here that's saying, I have a relationship with the Jets, so that means I can make them draft you. That's not how it works at all. Everyone's job is up for grabs every single year. They're not going to do that. But I do like, again, I don't know if you did this on purpose, but you essentially brought it up again, as you said, if someone needs something, you're already going to have it. As you were saying before earlier, how do you make sure those white spaces are good to go? If you have conversations, you're going to reach out to them first and then figure out how we can do this. You're reaching out to these teams, you're doing your due diligence, and you're always asking, how else can I help? What else can I do? And I really like that, and the fact that you understand the landscape of the NFL, you understand the landscape of your players and the realistic opportunities that they have, but you're still doing above and beyond. So if there is that opportunity for them to slide a little bit closer to, where you'd like to see them drafted, of course, more money for them, a couple extra bucks for you, and now everybody's even that much happier because you were prepared and you were ready. You weren't waiting for someone to ask for medical records. You already
Mm.
got the medical records. You weren't waiting for someone to say, oh, we don't like this. It's like, okay, you don't like this. Well, we have this entire tape here for you to look at, so that way we can kind of prove you wrong. And where do you learn these skills? Like, this is something that not everybody does this, right? Like, if everyone did it, it would be really easy. Where did you learn all these skills and having these opportunities always available?
Yeah, I think the parallel is it's easy. I'm a trial attorney at heart. One of the best ways to convince people of anything is to have the actual empirical data and evidence to back it up, right? So at trial, when I was a prosecutor, we had all these discovery requirements. So as a prosecutor, it's important, if you've got this much evidence, that the other side have this much evidence. You give it to them so they know exactly what they're going against. And it's a rule, right, that you have to comply with the discovery rules. So then when I became a defense attorney, and even later in my legal career, as I started doing personal injury plaintiffs work. Say, for example, a car accident case, something very, very simple. You get into a car accident, rear end, somebody's super injured. I think they should be getting $100,000. Well, no insurance company is going to give me $100,000 because I say this guy got hurt. I need the medical records that show he's got a fracture in his spine here. I got pictures of the actual accident. So for me, it was a very natural skill set that I learned from literally convincing folks on the legal side that
Mm-hmm.
I applied directly back to my sports agency and actually everything else that I do. When I'm at home, I'm talking to my fiance. It's like, we need to do X, Y, and Z. And this is why, because of X, Y, and Z, and have the data already there. So for me, I've always been about showing my work in terms of, arguments or convincing anybody of anything.
And that's the way you got to do it. Again, bringing up David Meltzer, we all love him, we all know him. Quantify everything, right? As long as you have the numbers and you can legitimately back it up. I mean, what else could you ask for? And so, I guess what are some of your favorite and least favorite things about being a sports agent? Because I'm sure there's some on both sides.
Yeah, for sure. My favorite thing, and I'm early in this part of my career, is watching the actual growth um, of these guys. Like you said, their minds are so young, and they're like sponges. A kid, 1 year to the next. You teach them about certain things. You tell them books to read, and you watch them become men. In a 2-year span or a 6-month span, they're growing so much. Knowing that you've had a positive impact, I think is the best feeling. For me, I've always had a soft spot. Eldest of 3 boys, 2 younger brothers. Always kind of played that big brother and mentor role. So it's something that I'm passionate about. So knowing I've made a positive impact on these guys is really important. The thing that I like or dislike the most is for sure the manipulation in this business that some families do,
Hmm.
the dishonesty that you find with certain individuals that tell you one thing and then go and tell the other person the same exact thing or something completely different,
Hmm.
in order to manipulate the situation to make it what they perceive as the most optimal for themselves. Those are things I dislike, but ultimately it goes back to same thing as my legal career, same thing with everything I do. I love doing things that I can help make a positive impact on people.
And it sounds like the pros significantly outweigh the cons there. Or if they didn't, you wouldn't be here that much longer. And the last question for me, man, is, I mean, what is it like? You kind of alluded to it, but I definitely, kind of want to hear it again a little bit deeper. What is it like knowing you're having such a huge impact in these young men's lives, and really knowing that, whether they're in the league for, one training camp, or whether in their league for 3 years, you have had the opportunity to really make a gigantic impact on who they will be as men and as human beings moving forward.
It's a feeling like none other. I'll give a perfect example. I don't, one thing is when you vibrate honest, right, and do things the right way, there's nothing to hide. I had a kid last year's draft, Stanley Barnwell out of New Mexico. Kid didn't get drafted. Got him into 2 camps. Really, really mature kid. Great kid. Got him in camp with the Ravens and the Dolphins. he shared with me that he felt like politics may have played a role in why he didn't get a chance to stay on. Had conversations with him throughout the process about maybe going to CFL or what he should be doing otherwise. But really, from the beginning of our relationship, and I think one of the reasons why he chose me as an agent and why we connected, I was concerned with what he wanted to do in life, who he was as a person, what his background was, going down, not just recruiting after I got the kid to spend time with his family to really learn about him. And I learned that, for him, he was, one of a few people in his neighborhood to graduate college. And it was really important for him to be somebody. So after the whole football route was over early on, and, I think he probably maybe kicked the tires on it a little prematurely, or prematurely than most would have, given, where he was athletically, being this close. He decided that he wanted to join the fire academy. And I think I had a pretty good role in that, from just talking to him about, what he wanted to do long term. And we identified that really early. But when we had the conversations, it was about, when I'm done playing 10 years from now, I want to be a firefighter, right? Because growing up, these are people I felt that were really, heroes, in my community. And this is what this kid shared with me. So after 2 camps, last year's draft was in April. By October, this kid is sitting for the test, and he's a fireman now already a year later. He was playing college football last year. He's a firefighter now, and he's happy, right? And we had opportunities this year. A couple teams from the XFL called, and he said, you know what? I'm good, right? I had a great college career. I'm able to be proud and make my parents proud every day. I graduated college. I'm a firefighter. Like that to me, and this is something that happened over the last 18 months, right? That showed the maturity of this kid that had this football dream. And through helping him out, not turning my back on him, being honest about expectations, which is really important about where he may fall and not fall in the draft. We knew it was going to be a long shot, but helping him figure out what it was and position himself after football, and it happened a lot earlier than we would have thought. That to me is a win. It feels amazing. Every time I speak to the kid, he's smiling ear to ear. Every time I speak to his parents, they're smiling ear to ear because he's a great kid. He's doing great things. And that's all 99% attributable to him and his family. I like to think I had a minuscule role in that, but it makes me feel good, right? Because I know he's going to go out and impact another 1,000 kids to do other great things.
And that's exactly what I was going to say. I mean, you've had an impact on his life, and now he is, as you said, he's happy. He's doing what he wanted to do in 10 years. Well, now he's doing it now, and he's absolutely ecstatic. And, football was fun. It was great. It led him here, and that's all that matters. And you were able to help him in that. And I think that's an incredible way to end this. David Moreno, partner at the law office of Spar and Bernstein, executive vice president at Shaw Sports Group, co-founder of Media Abundance. Really appreciate your time today, man.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate you.